here again. This is my third time over 20 years. The first time when Sterling Lord told Molly that he had a new author who was writing a book about Kerouac and art. Molly called and I came and I spoke on the book, and the book would not be published for another 7 years after that, which is exactly how long it took Sterling Lord to sell On the Road for Kerouac. But so then I spoke again about the book, and Molly and I got to know each other well, and as Molly pointed out, that we did a show together on the Beat Generation. The Beat Generation it started out when I was simply one of them without realizing it. I had gone to college, undergraduate school, up in Lowell, what is now UMass Lowell, and that was the town where Kerouac came from. And I was living a life that when I read On the Road, not so much inspired my life, but described it. It was all about hitchhiking all over New England, hanging out in Lowell. And when I got to NYU for graduate school a few years later, and I was looking for a topic for a doctoral thesis, that whole era was suddenly coming crystal clear. And so I wrote my thesis about that, the Beat Generation, the 60s, the hippies, and the NYU faculty said, great topic, we've never had courses on that. You got to stay here. And I became a professor and taught courses in a series called Art and Ideas, the Beat Generation, Art and Ideas, the 60s, and so forth. And they were graduate courses, so they were a real challenge because I liked having kind of grown-ups in the room, particularly in New York City where you get, people. This group looks a lot like a typical classroom, not a bunch.
But the total freedom we felt. What's the
Absolutely.
difference as you see it between that time the Beats were around and today?
Yeah, there's a tremendous misconception about the Beat Generation. Even the term, the word itself, it started, some people thought it had to do with the atomic bomb and that we were beaten down and that these guys were trying to separate themselves from society. All they were trying to do is not get caught up in what society would do to people, which is to over-civilize them, so they were really writers. They being Allen Ginsberg, Jack Kerouac, Gregory Corso, Lawrence Ferlinghetti, and there's another 10 people whose names aren't as well known, but they began really experimenting with language, with writing. Kerouac would write long sentences that were 3 pages long, but they were grammatically correct. The commas were in there, the hyphens were in there, the semicolons were there. Ginsberg said, a line of poetry should be as long as a breath, one breath. So he would say, I have seen the best minds of my generation destroyed by madness. Angel-headed hipsters dragging themselves through the streets at dawn looking for an angry fix. He got it from Whitman. Everything comes from something else, and Kerouac came pretty much from a lot of different literature early on, but Thomas Wolfe, for the most part. If you read Kerouac's first book, The Town and the City, you think it's written. It looks like the 4th book in the trilogy of Time in the River You Can't Go Home Again and Look Home with Angel. It's exactly the same. It was when he did On the Road where he decided that he is going to write the way he thinks. And Allen Ginsberg taught at Brooklyn College for many years. I got him into NYU, and when he was teaching there, his advice to his students was listen to the sound of your own voice. And he said, and read William Shakespeare. He said, and memorize William Shakespeare. He says, when you memorize William Shakespeare, and then just listen to your own voice. Suddenly, things like tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow creeps in its petty pace from day to the last syllable of recorded time. And that rhythm will go into it. And I felt it. My first serious venture into writing was with my doctoral thesis, which was based on the Beat Generation, the hippies, that whole thing. And I learned so much from Allen, from that advice. But Ferlinghetti, who distances himself from the Beats, Ferlinghetti is alive and well. He lives in San Francisco. He owns City Lights bookstore. He's a good friend of Molly's. We were at his 80th birthday party together. And Lawrence Ferlinghetti is a very gentle soul. He's very different. He doesn't appear to be a beat at all. And Allen Ginsberg would resent being called beat or beat. He acknowledged that he was categorized into the beat generation, but he didn't want to be called. In 1994, I organized with Allen a conference at NYU, a week-long Beat Generation conference, and we had a big brochure printed up. And the brochure came out, and my phone rings at 1:30 in the morning, and my wife answers it, and she says, and right away, Alan would just always say, "It's Alan," and she said, "It's Alan," and Alan says, "Am I a beat?" And I said, "My God, no, Alan, what's going on?" And well, and apparently he had just opened up the first page, the proofs of the thing, and somehow they referred to them as beat. He said, "I am a writer who is connected to the beat generation." He says, "Stop the presses if you have to." And I called the printing shop at that hour. I said, "Alan won't approve it. You got to stop it now, and we got to redo this whole thing." But the idea, Jack Kerouac said, beat means beatitude. Now he would go back and forth from being very Catholic and very Buddhist. Allen, on the other hand, was he was a Buddhist, a real practicing Buddhist. At his funeral, they had Buddhist priests and a Jewish rabbi, and it was really interesting how they combined that. Today, his ashes are buried, both in a Jewish cemetery and in a Buddhist place. If you went to Allen's little apartment on 12th Street and Avenue A, when you walked in, suddenly there were Tonka paintings all over and the prayer rugs, and he was very, very much involved.